Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Gig Harbor City Council study session of Thursday, December 15th. The time is 3:03 p.m. And I will do a roll call starting with Councilmember Storsett.
Here.
Councilmember Wood.
Here.
Councilmember Rodenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Likens. Here. Councilmember Barber.
Here.
Councilmember Dodson.
Short timer.
We will now go into executive session for 10 minutes to discuss potential litigation per RCW 42.30.110 for parentheses 1 parentheses I. No action will be taken following the executive session. So Seth, if you could please log off Zoom, and then we will call you from council chambers, and then council, we're gonna you can leave your stuff here and we'll go into chambers with Katrina Knudsen and Shannon Costanti, HR director, being present as well.
All right, thank you.
The executive session has been extended an additional 10 minutes until 3:23 p.m. The executive session is extended for an additional 10 minutes until 3:34 p.m.
You want to start?
Okay.
Welcome back to the Gig Harbor City Council study session of Thursday, December 15th. We've returned from executive session. No action will be taken, and the time is 3:33 p.m. Our first discussion item, I would like to introduce our appointee to the Parks Commission, Doug Smith. Thank you for being here with us, Doug. Appreciate your patience as well. And so I'd like to just give you an opportunity to let the council know a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in serving on the commission, and then they may have some separate questions for you.
Very good.
Well,
thank you very much. Opportunity. Sorry, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I'm concerned only because I'm in Malaysia, and so the transmission and internet is not always as reliable over here as it might be back home. Thank you very much for the chance. My name is Doug Smith. I've been a resident in Gig Harbor for about 3.5 years, since I retired from a 40-year career with ExxonMobil, where I was working around the world, wanted to retire and enjoy boating. Never had lived in this part of the world before, but very familiar with its reputation as a wonderful place for boating. So retired here, bought a boat, and then COVID came along right away. Tried to build a house during the middle of COVID and ended up living on the boat for a year while the house was built. But we moved in a couple of years ago now on Reed Drive, so just outside of incorporated Gig Harbor, I guess. In the process of living on the boat, my wife and I would get off and explore town every day because the boat is only 29 feet long, so it got small by lunchtime. And consequently, I feel like I know every park space in Gig Harbor. And I'm in retirement, was very keen on finding opportunities to volunteer. And so currently I'm involved with Kiwanis, part of the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and Special Olympics of Washington are the main things. But this seemed like a good fit. I was introduced to it only because I joined one of the park cleanups and met one of the commissioners. I can't remember who it was, and I apologize. But it looked like a good way to maybe provide some of my organizational skills and management background in a way that's meaningful and helpful for the community. So I took the opportunity to volunteer, and here I am. Or here I am in Malaysia.
Thank you so much. Any council members have questions for?
I'm curious what you're doing in Malaysia.
My wife is Malaysian, so I met her 38 years ago here. And so she still has family. So when it got cold, that first snowfall in Gig Harbor, she booked a flight back for a while to stay. But no, we have an apartment here in the capital, Kuala Lumpur. And so it gives her a chance to come back and see her family. So we'll be back here through the end of February and then back in Gig Harbor.
Great. Councilmember Wood.
I do have a couple of questions. Since you're not a full-time resident of Gig Harbor, I'm wondering how many parks commissioners do we have that are part-time residents of Gig Harbor? That's a Josh question.
Yeah, that would be, that'd be a Josh question.
The number of months that our commissioners spend in residency in Gig Harbor is not something we keep track of. If that's their home address, that's what we list.
Okay, I can tell you that I don't know that anyone is out of the country for 3 months or more. And in the past, we have had some concerns and there has not been support for folks who don't live in Gig Harbor full time. So that's a huge concern for me. Are you willing to live in Gig Harbor full time?
Yeah, it's a funny question. I kind of think that I do live in Gig Harbor. But obviously I vacation over here in Malaysia. 3 months is what it happens to be this trip. I mean, last time it was 2 months, or then it was none for 2 years during COVID. So it's not, I have no commitment to being out of the country. I do have a commitment to following my wife when she wants to come back and see her family. But my plan would be to retain the flexibility to be here in Malaysia for some period of time during the winter. And if that's not compatible with the job, then I can understand that. I am obviously available for opportunities like this, virtually, but I could not commit to not leaving for a couple of months each winter.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions from council? Okay, Doug, thank you so much. We hope that you're enjoying the warmer weather. I'm a little jealous. Have a great
am.
time. And thanks for being with us this afternoon.
Very good. Thank you for letting me speak.
You're welcome.
Have a great
I'll be
day.
in touch soon. You too.
Okay, bye.
Okay. So moving on to our second discussion item, which is our.
Can I say a couple of other things first?
Sure.
Okay, so our volunteer members for Parks Commission must live within the city limits or the city's urban growth area. It doesn't have a time frame on here because I don't think anybody ever expected that we would have a part-time resident wanting to be on this commission or any of our volunteer commissions. So I have real concerns about a part-time resident and their commitment to Gig Harbor, so.
I disagree with part-term resident terminology. He vacations with his wife to visit their family in another country for an unspecified amount of time each year. We can't dictate to our commissioners how often they travel and how long they stay on vacation. I don't think that would be fair of us to put that kind of restriction on a volunteer position. And so I do believe they are full-time residents of Gig Harbor and they vacation at certain times of the year. That's how I view this. I would be curious to see if other council members feel the same way or feel the same way as you. Because we are hybrid forever and ever, it seems, the plan will be. He can zoom in just like any of the other parks commissioners zoom in to meetings. And that was one of the main questions that I asked when I interviewed him was, are you going to be available by Zoom to be able to attend each meeting? And he said, absolutely. His whole career has been attending virtually from wherever he was in the world to any meeting that he needed to be at, no matter the time of day or night. So he's used to being up at all hours of the night if there was a meeting he needed to attend. And so that made me comfortable with putting him forward because of his confidence in his ability to attend the meetings and be here for Parks Appreciation Day, which is in April, and all the other main Parks Commission functions. He would be in Gig Harbor and living in the UGA and participating in those. Councilmember Lincoln.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, when we were discussing, I believe it was for short-term rentals, matter of fact, isn't the definition of someone's permanent residence 6 months plus a day?
Yes.
Isn't that is a legal definition, I know, of someone's permanent resident, and I feel like, shouldn't we, it would just feel like a sticky wicket to try to redefine that with all commissioners.
Councilmember Rundgren.
I agree with you, Mayor. I think that in today's technology, that would be okay to think otherwise, that they couldn't do their job. We now have the ability to get rid of a commissioner if they aren't doing their job. So I think if that would occur, then we could use that tool. But I'd say he seems like a smart guy, willing to do the job, and like well motivated to do the right job. So I would say that I have no problem with him being commissioner. And
I agree.
as far as anybody else is concerned, I think time will tell. Certainly willing to have him.
I appreciate everybody's concerns, I really do, and comments, and I took them into consideration when I saw that on the application. And by the way, he was the only applicant, so that was another consideration was, do we open this back up again and probably get no one? So, you know, we like to keep these vacancies as short as possible on our commissions, and he is a really intelligent man, and I think that he would do a great job.
I have a question. When you make your decision, do you speak to other parks commissioners about that candidate?
I don't call other commissioners. Sometimes I'll have Carl do some of that because he's.
So I'd be wondering if they had a concern. And, but.
I
would
could
say
certainly do that
I
before
would
the
put
final.
their concerns just the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
But,
I would be more than willing to call parks commissioners and ask them if they have any concerns
well,
with
call
that.
them in 6 months and say, how's it going?
Well, yeah, that too.
I
Councilmember
think
Dudson?
Councilmember Rodenberg makes a good point, and we used to have a committee interviewing people, and we always had the chair of the Parks Commission with us. He wasn't a voting member, but we appreciated his input, so calling the chair on these things might be just a nice thing to do anyway.
Yeah,
That's something that we could add to our, the written policy,
Mhm.
that we would add in the chair of the
that they-
commission.
yeah, we'd have a conversation with the chair and
That would mean a lot to them.
about the applicants.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I do,
Yeah,
Unless the applicant is the chair.
True.
right. The applicant is the chair.
Like,
Then- We talk to the staff that's in charge of that commission, and if, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
we talk to all the other.
Not
commissioners
Or all the
about
other chairs. But that's a good
suggestion.
suggestion too. We can,
Yeah.
yeah, or default to the
Yeah.
vice chair. If the chair is as the applicant, we can default to the vice chair.
I do,
Stop. Blow your nose, stop.
Oh,
Someone
someone
needs
needs
to
to unmute?
That's it.
oh.
Yeah, Councilmember
Thank you,
Storch
Chad.
has his hand raised. I don't think you can see that.
Oh, I can't.
Yeah, hey, sorry about that. I was waiting for the right time to interject because since I can't raise my hand in the room, but I just wanted to add some comments to it as well. I think, you know, if we wanted to look at this from, you know, how other things are deemed legal for where your permanent residence is at a half year, we could throw that in there. I really don't think we're going to have any candidates that exceed the 6 months being elsewhere, but I think all of us, you know, can relate, maybe not to 2 or 3 months at a time going somewhere. But there's travel, and you know, as the other Zoomer on here besides Daniel, and our new commissioner, I think it's like Councilmember Rodenberg said. I think that's, you know, technology has advanced so much that it allows us to do this. I think it really comes back to, of course, you know, a reasonable amount of time living in the area, but that it's also, excuse me, but that what we call home. And if you call Gig Harbor home and that's your main residence, then that to me is a huge qualifier. So I just wanted to add that to it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Storsett, for that. What were you gonna say?
Well, I was just gonna acknowledge that I think Jenny's point, or Councilmember Wu, sorry, point about, I don't know if it's so much residency, but we have had, and I hear the concern, we've had commissioners that have not been here,
Sure.
have not attended meetings. And so I definitely acknowledge that is an issue that we've had in the past.
But
And-
they were residents and full-time
Yeah.
residents, so.
And didn't participate.
Right, so
And so they were let go from the
exactly,
commission and,
there is a process
Yeah.
in place. If this becomes misused and instead of 3 months a year,
yes.
he or she is gone 8 months of the year, well, all right, or they're not coming to the meetings.
Yeah.
So there is a process.
I would rather see a requirement for a longer term residency. I think it's hard to live in this town 1 year and have a handle on what the community wants. You know, you might live in this town 1 year, have a hand on what you want because of where you came from. But I think a person needs to get a feel for the community before they're on a commission that determines the direction of the community. It's my own view.
It would be nice to have some more choices. I think we need to do whatever we need to do to get the word out more for more applicants, especially for something like the Parks Commission. We used to have lots of applicants. It was always a choice.
Yeah.
And then you can make the choices about, longevity and commitment and all that.
It's in our
So,
news flash, it's in the Gigabyte, I mean,
I don't know what
we
else.
put
to
it
do.
out everywhere, social media, like everywhere, and still got one, so.
And I think
we
some
can
of that
all do a
is
better job.
post-COVID
too. And
Yeah,
the feeling that maybe the commissions weren't doing as much during COVID. I think we can do more about talking about what they're doing.
Councilmember, Wu, for your concern, is it the acknowledgement that if applicants don't, or the commissioners don't show up to meetings, that we would remove them? Is that a comfort in the concern that you raised?
I guess my concern has to do with as well, other commissioners who do have a commitment to live here full time. This is their home. They've made a commitment to Gig Harbor. Yeah, there's a question on his application. What current Parks Commission project is most interesting to you and why? And he put in Penn Med Parks on Reed Road. The new building, the new thing that's happening there. So, I mean, 3 years, I don't know, maybe sometimes you can understand what's happening in your town for 3 years. But that's a concern to me when you have one answer like that and they don't even, and no city park is included, and it makes me concerned that maybe someone hasn't been listening to parks meetings or looking at the pros plan, or, and so if they're not in town for 3 months and, if they have issues with the internet, as he mentioned before, I mean, I have concerns about people being committed to this community.
okay, thank you so much for that feedback, and I will process all of that from all of you. I appreciate all your feedback. Okay, so moving to item 2, short-term rental regulations. We have our report from our Community Development Director, Carl DeSimas.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council. I would like to also note that I have Jeremy Hamlin with me, who's been assisting with the short-term rental regulations all the way through the planning commission. He's been a triple part of the team. I don't know if you've all had the pleasure of meeting Jeremy in the past or not, various times, but he's associate planner here. He's been with us for year and a half. And he's just really doing an exemplary job. So
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so I hope you all had an opportunity to review the draft regulation and the associated staff report. So I'm not going to belabor the staff report too much. I think, we want to get into the meat of the discussion, which is obviously the regulations themselves. So what I thought is that, got a couple things to say here, and then I thought we could discuss a couple of examples, walk through the draft regulations. And then we could open up over more discussion at the end of that. But first, so I want to emphasize, though, that this draft is based on the work that our planning commission conducted over the past year, as well as public input we received, staff research on the topic as well. We feel these regulations represent the best of what we have learned and heard, and will serve the community's interests in a fair, equitable manner. We also feel these regulations are enforceable and feasible from an administrative standpoint. I just note that the planning commission during their work on this topic reviewed and considered various options along the way, all relatively similar, but with some key differences. The biggest difference being conversations around owner occupied versus non-owner occupied operations. Again, though, we feel this draft proposal strikes a balance between those two competing interests. Also note that the staff feels that short-term rentals are a viable lodging option for Gig Harbor and contribute to our economic vitality and housing diversity. However, allowing the use without proper regulatory framework could have repercussions on some of our goals that are set out in the comprehensive plan, to include the work that we're going to be doing in the upcoming periodic update, whereby we're going to be tasked with planning for future housing affordability, availability based on income bands. So same time, unregulated could take away from our housing stock in some ways as well, right? So finding that balance is really what we're looking for here. So if there are no objections, I thought I'd share my screen first and maybe we can look at the short-term rental distribution map that we had included as an exhibit. It's gonna be a little bit small, isn't it?
So planning commission has seen this new ordinance and we haven't heard from them at all.
Though they have not seen it actually, because it was taken, council decided to consider it directly. So we didn't get a recommendation from planning commission. If you'll recall, so planning commission went through their process. They got to a point where they were ready to discuss. We had a public hearing, we had 2 public hearings. They deliberated and they were unable to come to a conclusion on a recommendation. They wanted more time. We came back to council and asked for more time. Council determined that they would consider it directly instead. So the regulations that you have here are sort of an amalgam of that work the planning commission did, along with what staff research, along with staff's research and all of the public input that we heard. And so we tried to pull something together that was in that vein and sort of in the direction that we felt planning commission was moving in at that time.
Thank you.
So we pulled this map together. We thought it'd be useful. It was something that planning commission was really interested in actually when we were going through that process. But we didn't have at the time, we didn't really have the key addresses, you know, to figure out exactly where short-term rentals were in the city. We kind of knew generally where they were based on some of the data that we got from some of these companies like Granicus and some of those companies out there that do this work, AirDNA being another one. But Jeremy did some deep diving here just recently, actually, because I asked him if he could just kind of get a sense of what he thinks, you know, the number of short-term rentals out there right now looks like. Because that, you know, these are point in time kind of things, you know, because people aren't necessarily renting short-term rentals year long. It's often seasonal. So in the summer, you might see more than you might see in the winter. So we thought it'd be interesting to see how many are out there right now. Jeremy looked into it. It's 25, I believe, is what he had come up with. So we asked Wendy Simmons, our GIS coordinator, to take a crack at just kind of providing a heat map to kind of show where these things are at within the city spatially. And so, you know, it's obvious what the map is showing us that, you know, they're more concentrated sort of in the downtown area, and then a little more concentration in Finholm, and then, you know, kind of spread out from there. Those dots might represent one or two probably. You know,
And that's kind of what I was gonna get at, is that although it looks ominous, that, you know, that one big thing like this could be one point, somebody.
Sure, yeah, it might be, you know.
I mean, it's nice, it shows one thing, that it looks like there's more downtown,
Mhm.
but that could be 3 downtown and, you know, 1 everywhere else, and it still gets the yellow on fire thing.
Yeah, and that's a great point, yeah, because we're talking about, with this map, we're talking about 25 units. You know,
Right.
So you have to kind of take it in, you know, take it in stride a little bit, but
That's what, yeah, because purple is 1, right?
Yes.
essentially,
Okay.
yeah, right.
But you don't,
There's 1 across the street from me, so that's how I figured it out.
Right. Yeah, so that's a great point, you know, but we just thought it was an interesting reference piece for you all when you're considering these, how many we actually have in the city as of last month, you know, or in the winter time.
You may have just answered my question about what point in time this was taken. Does this include anybody that is paying like lodging tax or taxes to the city? Based on, or how did you come up with?
So
that
these were
20?
found by going through various short-term rental platforms. There's Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway, a few others that aggregate the listings.
Okay,
So it's kind of able to go through those listings, compare them with county assessor data, just to really pinpoint the locations. Searches were done from that usually take either period of a weekday or during the week, maybe a weekend. I did that for all the months from December through June. And there were some that were only available in spring and summer, others through the winter.
So you did it from this past June to now, or last December to, I'm just curious,
This current December to the.
back to June?
future.
Okay.
So these are the ones that are currently accepting.
Oh, okay.
We wanted to book out in June from today.
Right.
This is might be what was available now. In a couple months, that might change. There might be more listings.
Is there any, data, can you tell us which of those are owner occupied by any chance? No, sure. Yeah.
We don't have that. And to answer your question, I think, well, I looked at you, I think we have, how many permitted as conditional uses right now is lodging level one?
Yeah.
I think there's only what,
Three.
or
Three,
four?
yeah, three of those. So
Right,
in that yellow area there, that might include and likely does include, those three units.
okay. And those are non-owner occupied, correct?
That's correct.
One of them.
Is, oh, that's right. One of them, the gentleman rents it out for 6 months out of the year, and then he's gone for 6 months out of the year. That's right, yeah. We do know that for sure on one of those.
And will those will those, like stay with that house and address if it sells? Or how, or will they become a part of it?
For those that are actually legally permitted right now as lodging level one, they would remain that lodging level one use. They have a conditional use permit. They went through the process that the city had in place when they made
Right.
application. And so they are a legally conforming use.
So
as far
that's
as that goes.
to
So they-
the address, not the person.
Correct.
So it would stay with that address in perpetuity?
Well, not necessarily in perpetuity, but it would stay with that address as long as that use is in place. If the use were, how does it go read? Is it 1 year? I'd have to look that up. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's not, it's definitely not in perpetuity. It's as long as they maintain that use. If they stop maintaining that use for a certain period of time, then they might lose that, that right.
Okay, thanks.
Sure, Jeremy's looking into it, so I'll have an answer for you shortly.
It's all good. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions about the map?
Oh, not about the map.
Oh. Did you have another question?
Got a couple.
So my plan was then to kind of walk through, I think everybody has the regulations in front of them, hopefully, and I thought maybe we would just walk through section by section, and then you could ask questions about each section as we go through. That might be the most easiest way to go.
You want us
through
to
it.
do it as you go through?
Yeah, I'm fine
Okay.
with that.
Carl, is that Josh that has the map of?
No, I do. You want me to stop sharing?
No, it's fine.
We'll leave that one.
I was just curious if it would be more, if it would be helpful if I had it up so you could talk and I could scroll.
The regulations?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the entire regulation wasn't provided to us again in the packet.
It was an
Yeah.
attachment to the
It's
staff
at the
report.
end.
Yeah,
After the stuff.
it's part of the staff report.
Oh,
So it goes staff report and then,
I was expecting an
On
updated
page-
document.
It's on page 12.
Well,
yeah, it's not that long.
then I have a simple question about that one. You footnote 13. I didn't quite see where that was applicable to anything. Page 9.
Is Daniel on the line?
Yes, I am.
Daniel, could you speak to footnote number 13, the dormant commerce clause?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do it fairly briefly. So a member of or a resident of the city had identified a court case that dealt with the dormant commerce clause and regulations in another location. That was analyzed by staff along with another case that is more applicable both factually to the proposed regulations here and then also in the Ninth Circuit. And so it was just a call out to the reference and the letter that the city received on that topic.
Does the Commerce Clause really apply here?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure.
It doesn't seem like it would.
Well,
Without being an attorney.
the city's position is that the draft regulations are fine with the Commerce Clause. They were factually distinguishable from the case that was brought up. To the extent that council would like to have, a legal discussion, we can do that in a privileged context, whether that's by a memo afterwards or in another venue. So we can get there if we need to.
And I think it was the understanding that that was brought into the memo to sort of assure the city that there's less risk in the current regulations than we may have thought from other lawsuits, right?
I think the point was to acknowledge the comment, from the resident, that it was heard and understood to be a concern, and that it was analyzed, and that what's being brought forth to you is factually distinguishable from the concern that was raised.
Daniel, are you saying that we would need to go into executive session to talk about that more in depth?
I was just trying to get educated. I don't really need to go into executive session. I could call Daniel outside of this, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to give, my legal analysis to quote unquote my client, which is the city council members, I would do that outside of the open public meeting. But you certainly do not need that in this moment, and we can find a venue to do that, which is appropriate. But of course, all of your deliberations, discussions, analysis of the draft would be open session for everybody in attendance tonight and other evenings.
But something that Roger just brought up. So this is, we've determined is less risk. We looked at all the risks, and we determined that our draft is now less risk. It doesn't mean no risk. So we're being asked to approve something with risk, but what we think is low risk.
That's correct, Councilman Roden. I think that's a great way of characterizing it. I mean, there's always risk whenever city takes any kind of action. So, but this has been gone through an analysis that gives us some confidence that we're on good ground. Okay. Okay, so first section then that we were proposing to make an amendment to is chapter 1704, which would be our definitions, slight change to lodging level 1. And then of course, all of the underlined definitions in the draft regulation are new definitions for that title. So vessel, and I say that because vessel is actually defined in our shoreline master program. We just took that definition from the master program. But the others are really created. And we found some of this language in other ordinances places. But as you'll see then, the really key terms here, I guess, are primary residence. And then of course, the short-term rentals 1, 2, and 3. So creating 3 new uses within Title 17.
So am I correct, Carl, that the best short-term rental 3, it's a vessel that has to be used as the primary residence of the person who owns the vessel?
That's correct. And
which seems to restrict, I mean, I can't imagine that.
It is a bit restrictive, and it's a great point. I'm glad you bring it up, but the reason for that is because that's how our shoreline master program defines liveaboards as well. So we're a bit beholden in that sense that a liveaboard, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, in case I get this wrong, but a liveaboard for our shoreline master program needs to be the person's primary residence in order for them to use it as a liveaboard. So in other words, we know we have some liveaboards that are in the harbor now that are probably operating illegal, most likely.
We have some liveaboards or some short-term rentals that are vessels.
Well, I wouldn't characterize them as short-term rentals because we don't have that defined yet.
Okay.
So I was confused by this section too. So if there is a vessel, there's a boat in a commercial marina,
Yes,
does that fall under short-term rental 2 because it's commercial area? And so it doesn't have to be a primary resident, it could be rented for commercial.
there would be a short-term rental 3.
because it's a vessel, all vessels are short-term rental 3. So I do question how is somebody gonna have a primary residence in a boat and also have a short-term rental, because boats are small.
They're small, yes. I mean, some people do live on, know people who live on their boat. And I suppose there could be someone who lives on their boat, or, and the other thing is that, remember, their primary resident doesn't have to be the owner. So it could be somebody who's renting a vessel, they live there part-time, live someplace else, maybe part-time, but they live there more of the time, therefore it becomes their primary residence, and then they could rent that out as a short-term rental.
So if they live there that 6 months plus 1 date, they could rent out the rest of the time.
Sure.
They can go to the same time.
Correct.
Like our new parks commissioner lives on a boat that takes 3 months vacations.
For example,
You could rent it out.
that's correct.
I just have a question about, the intent of requiring primary residence for both, like how that would affect community affordable housing. You know, and having too many, you know, short-term rentals that would affect how on a boat is that affecting the goals that we set forth? That's my question.
So the question is the question is essentially, why are we including vessels
residency.
within the short-term rental ordinance at all?
Well, no, the residency requirement for vessels, that's more what I'm.
Well, the reason that we're bringing it into this ordinance is because that's how it's defined within our shoreline master program. So if we created this ordinance and it was running contrary to our shoreline master program, we would have two competing.
So the shoreline master program. Okay, I was just trying to think, are you doing it because you have the residency requirement for the land one and trying to make it consistent that way?
So the shoreline master program, if a property owner on the shoreline wants to build a commercial marina. And they come in, they get the permits, they go through shoreline substantial development permit. As part of that process, they have to meet certain provisions within the shoreline master program. That's mostly safety, fire,
Sure.
Sanitation, those sorts of things. As a part of that, though, it also states in our shoreline master program that if they want to have liveaboards as part of their commercial marina, and a liveaboard can only be defined as a liveaboard if it's in a commercial marina, they have to give us the number of those liveaboards. So in other words, the shoreline master program is sort of driving the land use, is sort of the underlying land use for allowing these things to exist. And this is kind of supplementary in the sense that this is another layer adding in that business component, I guess you could say, to that liveaboard. But the liveaboard has to be established first, and that could only really be established and exist legally in our city per the shoreline master program.
Carl, I think that the confusion may be, is it a requirement of the shoreline master program to have the liveaboard be a primary residence, or is that something that that we're proposing to put on with these regulations? For instance, if somebody has a large yacht and they have it at an approved marina that meets the shoreline master program, but they live somewhere else in the city, their home technically would be their primary residence, correct? Although their boat may be as a liveaboard. And so I think that may be part of the confusion.
So I'll read the definition of liveaboard from the shoreline master program. Jeremy has graciously pulled it up for me here. Thank you, Jeremy. Been bailing me out throughout this whole process. The liveaboard vessel is a vessel, typically a yacht or other recreational watercraft, which is used as a primary residence by one or more persons who may or may not be related by blood or marriage. And so the liveaboard, by definition in our S&P, is a primary residence.
And is that a state requirement?
I don't know that.
Okay.
That's a good question.
That may be something to find out to bring back. And Mary, do you want to do a time check? We're almost at 4:15.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
We have 2 other items after this, but
Did you want to go until 4:30?
I think we're gonna need more time than that.
What-
We're gonna need, based on,
Well,
Two things.
based on my questions.
we just, well,
Yeah, we
Yeah,
have to do 45
yeah,
minutes
we
with
have to
38th Avenue
five,
and Storm
yeah.
Road.
And I don't know that we can extend because I believe this room is being used at 5:30, right? So we can't extend very much after 5.
I would recommend that we see if council wants to postpone this one and have a special work session, or if they would prefer to keep going on this above the other.
Right.
Yes, so council, the two options that we have, because we are not going to get through all of this before 5, is would you like to continue going on with this item and bump these other two to another session? Or would you like to have a special session just for short-term rentals and go forward with these two now, today, the 38th and the stormwater management?
Could I ask which of those two topics, 38 or this, is more pressing time-wise? This, Jeff, Public Works waiting on a direction to move ahead, or did they wait? a week?
I should pull Jeff over so I can ask him
38th
that.
is
38th is time sensitive.
So maybe we should, well, my vote, if 38th is more time sensitive than this, then
Yes,
that we can say, let's table this or continue until we give 30th enough time and then come back to this later.
Actually, do the other two and then make a whole.
have a
I
separate.
like to do a separate session
Okay,
just
that
for
needs
this.
to be
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
con- yeah.
I have a bunch of questions.
Yeah, and believe it or not, as long as we've had this, I still feel I haven't.
That's fine.
Yeah.
There's a lot to consider and a lot to read and digest, and maybe then it would give some chances for council to ask you all some questions
Yeah.
ahead of that meeting too.
What did you just say, Councilman Rutherford? There was still, this is still, it's still not clear.
We just
Yeah.
have, yeah,
No,
We have a
so
lot
what
of
I said was this deserves another full work session dedicated to it.
Yeah, nothing
Because
else.
as long as we've been dragging on for a year and a half, and so I still don't understand the whole thing and what's new.
Okay,
That's all.
that's what I want to hear. I just wanted to know, okay, what I can do better.
Yeah.
So I understand it, I just
You're doing great.
can't connect the dots.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
no, you all are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Job, this is my job.
Yeah, but I was just gonna say that it's complex. It's complex and, a lot of those planning terms that are so rote for you, we're like, okay, try me again. Over and over and trying to figure out the differences. So we appreciate.
I need to do some reloading.
Okay.
Yes,
Would it be
Yeah.
helpful for us to provide maybe to you a list of questions or things that might be helpful if we have those from today? So that you can see them beforehand and maybe have some answers?
So we were gonna ask.
So you're not having to look it up like I'm sitting here asking you.
But some answers lead to more questions.
Yeah, they
Since
do.
this is
They
a
do,
topic
you're
that's
right.
before council, I would suggest that you could email your comments or your questions, excuse me, directly to Jeremy and Carl. And if you could CC me, that would be great, just so that I'm aware of what your general questions are. But feel free to send those directly to Carl and Jeremy, and then they can report back on those questions to you. And then if everyone has a similar question, we can report on that at the work session.
That would be helpful.
we want to give you guys the time that you deserve to explain
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
and have council understand.
Sorry about that.
Was that a sign? No. But yeah, we want to give staff and council the appropriate time to really digest all of this because it is such a big subject and we want to get it right. And I know you guys do too. And so, yeah, thank you both
Thank you, Mayor.
for being here and for providing this is great detail and hopefully, we can ask some questions ahead of the next one and then really just have that time dedicated to this subject only. So I think that would be good.
Sounds good.
And Mayor, I might
Thank you very
suggest
much,
if you
Council.
have-
Really appreciate
Maybe
it.
half a day or a day and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're taking a half.
Maybe we'll do a retreat.
Retreat on.
Okay, here's the one she
We added FTR.
I might suggest that since we have a number of folks online who are listening in and interested parties, that they be also encouraged to email with any questions to staff that we have so that we can ensure
Yes.
that those can be clarified as well.
Yes,
That's
please.
a great idea.
Yes, thank you. Thank you
That's
for
a great
those
idea.
in attendance. Please send your questions to, which email address would you like them to send their comments and
To
questions?
Carl and to Carl and
To Carl and to Jeremy. So, would you like to provide your email addresses real quick, just for the people that are listening?
Demas, DECDESIMAS gigharborwa.gov. And
J Hammer, it's JHAMMAR at gigharborwa.gov.
Okay,
And then all the questions and answers come back.
yes. So all the questions and answers will come back to council and for discussion at the at the next study session. Okay, great. Thank you to those that are online. We look forward to your comments and your questions. Thank you again, Carl and Jeremy. Really appreciate your
Thank
work
you, Mayor.
on
Thank you,
this.
council.
Thank you,
Thank
council,
you guys
for
very much.
allowing more time. Appreciate that. So Jeff, I don't know if you're expecting to come now, but we could take a 5-minute break if you all are needing that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 4:23. Recording. Welcome back to the Gig Harbor City Council study session of Thursday, December 15th, 2022. Time is 4:25 p.m. We are going to table items 2 and 3 to meetings at another date and time that will be posted on our website and go right into discussion item number 4, which is our 38th Avenue half-width roadway improvements, phase 2, roadway sidewalk alignment alternatives. And here to present is our Public Works Director, Jeff Langhelm, and I will let Jeff introduce our other guests.
Thank you, council. Yes, so we have with us today talking about 30th Avenue alternatives. Aaron Holst, city engineer, and
Nathan Anderson, KPFF, civil engineer.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna hand this over to Aaron and Nathan. They're gonna lead us through this discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. Yeah, Josh, I don't know if you could eventually, in a minute here, Nathan is gonna need to be invited in as a presenter so we can share a presentation you guys put together. Thank you. But yeah, today we're here to talk about some design alternatives for the 38th Avenue Phase 2 project. One of the things we'll be discussing are the pros and cons of the city's typical roadway section for a collector roadway versus constructing some form of an alternative roadway section for 38. Another topic we'll be discussing is Public Works recommendation for roadway lighting, otherwise known as illumination. And finally, we will be discussing whether or not City Council recommends us constructing signal and ADA improvements at the intersection of 56 and 38 now with the 38th Avenue Phase 2 project, or at a later date, which now is slated to be 2026 for what we call the 38th Avenue Phase 1C project. So, and that's just a high level view of kind of what we'll be going over tonight. So I'd like to hand it over to Nathan. He has a presentation.
Okay, so thank you for having me. I first want to just talk about what the work we've done currently on the project. So we first laid out the city standard roadway typical section, just the east side improvements. So that includes pavement widening for a bike lane, curb and gutter, 5.5 foot planter, and a 6 foot sidewalk. So we laid that out on our project limits of course, 56th Street all the way up to Hunt Street. We then assessed the impacts to trees, right away, the need for walls because we're excavating into the embankment of the side of the road. And then we documented our findings. We then went back and created a second alternative. This time very similar to the city typical section, except we removed the planter to shift the sidewalk adjacent to the curb line. And then again, we went through the process of assessing the impacts of that design. And I'll be talking about those. In addition to that work, we determined the lighting requirements to meet city standards for both alternatives. We determined stormwater requirements and have a high-level storm drainage plan. We've also performed a geotechnical analysis of the soils. The preliminary results do show some favorable conditions for infiltration of the stormwater. We do need to complete some additional on-site testing to confirm that. But right now, our storm drainage design assumes there's no infiltration because then you'll get a more conservative, larger number because it takes more infrastructure. But as we get into the design process, if we can infiltrate, that cost would come down. Let's see, we also developed overall construction cost estimates for both alternatives. And then we were also asked to look at the intersection of 56th Street and what it would take to upgrade the signal system there, so all new poles and mast arms. And then the west side, as you may or may not know, doesn't have any curb ramps or sidewalk. So there's no ADA accessible areas. And so we've also looked at costing those improvements. And then at the end of the slide, presentation, we'll have a recommendation.
So quick question. I see the alignment, I see the standard cross section. Was there some talk at one point of shifting the roadway over, or is that not necessarily shown by those two?
Yeah, there was talk. What you're seeing here currently basically matches the existing painted center line. So you would just have that widening on the east side. The west side, there are some challenges with shifting that roadway over. Several areas have some right of way that's a lot closer to the existing edge of pavement than other areas. It's almost like the road is currently already a bit shifted to the west. So some sort of additional shifting to the west would prevent future sidewalk or bike lanes without right-of-way acquisition on the county side. In addition, there's an existing ditch over there, as you can see in the graphic. So shifting over would also require an entirely new storm drainage system on that side. So there were some constraints involved that we, I believe, determined to be infeasible or not ideal. And so we maintained the current center line.
I can speak a little bit more to that too. One of the big reasons that we were proposing going with this instead of shifting the roadway over to that side is because we don't have enough right-of-way space. If we do come back and construct the typical city standard sidewalk section on that side of the roadway, we don't want to take away the space that would be necessary to have sidewalks on both sides of the road at a future date.
Okay, so given the ditch there, would we ever go back and do that, even with the current line?
We at least have the ability to, we'd have to, like Nathan's referring to, we'd have to put in storm structures and we think we could make it work, but at
It
least
wouldn't be cheap and it wouldn't be easy, so, I mean, it sounds like a reason, but what's there probably would prevent us from ever doing that anyway.
And for the sake of time, council, maybe if you could write your questions down and write the slide number down, if that's all right with you, unless you want questions before your presentation is done.
Yeah, I'm fine with questions during.
Okay.
If you guys-
Whatever you would like to do. I just want to make sure you're able to get through your entire presentation.
Okay, yeah,
I have a quick question.
sure.
Probably be a quick answer. Did you guys consider doing a shared path like we're doing on Burnham? Instead of doing the separate bike path and then sidewalk, and would that have helped maybe shrink the footprint of the improvements?
Well, so a shared path, minimum would be 10 feet. So I don't know exactly how much you'd be gaining here with a 5-foot bike lane and a 6-foot sidewalk. That space, if it goes to 10 feet, it's a 1-foot difference. That's not much of an advantage.
No, that was my same thought with the 10-foot shared use path is minimum 10 feet wide to meet the standard for a shared use path. So we're maybe gaining a foot or so, but it's not gonna gain us too much more space here if we don't get that much.
And financially, does it save us any money or anything?
Yeah, I don't see how it would. It seems like a very similar to what we're going to be presenting.
Is a shared use path more dangerous for pedestrians?
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good point. There is a safety element of pedestrians separated from the bicycles.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
All right, so first impact the trees, and I know you all have already seen a graphic depicting that, just to reiterate. So alternative one in that image you see, this is the left side of the road there is the east side, so we're looking south. So we'd have the 5-foot bike lane, the 5.5-foot planter, and a 6-foot sidewalk. So as you can imagine, that really eats into that embankment, and of course, quite a few trees all along the corridor would be removed to construct that. Alternative two, so you would get rid of the planter, have the sidewalk next to the curb line. It would only impact 9 trees. And just to note, even though we have drip lines over the road and typically critical routes are going out to the drip line, in this case, that embankment there is an advantage to alternative two, because that embankment has already hindered root growth on that side. So we think it's highly unlikely that, the excavation and construction activities right adjacent to the road are not gonna impact the critical root structure.
So if those poor condition trees are not the same as the 9 trees, then there really is 20 trees that's got to come down.
Those would be added to it, yeah.
For an
So
alternative to it.
that's
So
correct.
20 versus 41.
It would be 20 versus 52. So the poor trees are just recommended to come out for overall health of the other trees and because they're at risk of falling. Next, I was going to talk about right-of-way impacts. So alternative 1 down at the south end near 56th Street. Due to that turn lane there, it's really pushed out the roadway footprint. And our sidewalk and alternative 1 with the planter would go past the right-of-way line on those 3 parcels. We estimate approximately 1,500 square feet. Preliminary estimates for acquiring that property are 40,000.
What's the dark?
That's just it's a part of our engineering drawing. That represents the full depth pavement widening area.
Okay. So you've got a pretty well swept corner there.
Correct. And yeah, we'll talk about that corner when we get to the 56th Street intersection as well. That is important. I'll turn it over to Aaron to talk a little bit about the lighting.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, what we're looking at here on this screen is, there's really not too much of a difference with alternative 1 versus alternative 2. If we're going with the city standard decorative roadway luminaires, it's just either 20 poles with alternative 1 versus 18 poles with alternative 2. And that is just our standard 20-foot poles with the 80 watt, 4,000 Kelvin temperature LED bulb. And aside from spacing and what poles that we're recommending going with, I wanted to touch a little bit on Kelvin temperature because that topic came up a little bit at the open house, and there's been some emails to city council back and forth. So I want to touch a little bit on that. So upon hearing that there was concern from the public with Kelvin temperature, the engineering division did some research and reached out to City of Tacoma, City of Seattle, Pierce County, Lakewood, and a number of jurisdictions and got their input on this topic. And I guess just high level Kelvin temperature, what our standard is 4,000 Kelvin temperatures for our LED luminaires that light our roadways. That's fairly what I refer to as a white light. Once you get into like the 6,000 Kelvin temperature range, it's much more blue. And then on the other end of the spectrum, 2,000 Kelvin, you're talking like a reddish, yellow, orange type of color. So 4,000 is what, when we did this research, and we did this research initially to adopt this standard that we have today, but to follow up after this open house, I looked into it a little bit further. Tacoma has stuck with 4,000 Kelvin temperature, and so, excuse me, so is the city of Seattle. And the reason that city of Seattle did a really extensive safety survey on how Kelvin temperature of lighting affects how an object is recognized in the roadway by a driver of a vehicle, and that's what this graph is depicting. So you can see for 4,100 Kelvin temperature, if you're this roadway is 30 miles an hour, but vehicles do often travel faster than that on all roads, as we know. So for 40 miles an hour, what this graph is depicting, that an object is recognizable to a vehicle at a distance of 120 feet. And the purple bar graph up there is just kind of the average of that. So what City of Tacoma and City of Seattle have found is that for these these speed limits identified on this bar graph, the 4,000 Kelvin temperature is far superior, not only to the lower lighting temperatures, but the higher lighting temperatures as well. The objects are recognizable to a person in a vehicle at a further distance. And I'm happy to answer any questions on this, but just to summarize, our recommendation is to stick with what the city standard has been. It's based on a lot of a lot of safety analysis that's been done in the past by us, other jurisdictions, and it's a nationally recognized standard for roadway safety.
But other cities use the lower Kelvin.
Some other
They aren't
cities,
illegal.
some other cities do, and what we talked to Tacoma about, we actually had a meeting with them to talk about this, and what they've adopted is a lower Kelvin temperature of light is permissible for a non-classified roadway, so for a low volume local roadway for like a really condensed subdivision, they will allow 3,000 Kelvin temperature for lower speed, lower volume local roadway.
What other options were looked at this, or just we said we're gonna do the standard and then? That's it. I mean, did we look at some other options besides just Kelvin, like different streetlights, lower, higher, whatever?
Yeah, and yeah, I can expand on this a little bit, but as part of our illumination analysis, and we don't have the software here in-house, but our consultant always goes through the illumination analysis, and what we look at with that is a number of things, but again, it's based on nationally recognized safety standard that we've adopted a number of years ago. They go through and they input the roadway into the software, and it calculates average foot candles based on the roadway section that we're constructing. So what Nathan and his team have done is they go in and they input the roadway, and it gives you an output, and it estimates the average foot candles to meet our standard that's going to be required, and that's what that spacing of those luminaires is based on. It also looks at uniformity ratio, so you don't have hot spots and darker spots that are difficult to see as you're navigating a roadway, and a number of other things.
Is that strictly dependent on the Kelvin or on the actual lumens? Because you can have yellow light that gives you the same number of lumens per square meter as ultra white light or blue light or whatever.
It takes
correct?
into account both, yeah. Because the Kelvin temperature will affect the brightness of the light.
Councilmember Wood?
So as drivers are driving on the street, what, are they gonna have a perceived difference between 20 poles and 18 poles?
I don't think so.
No, yeah, they're pretty similar.
Okay.
Councilmember Barbara?
I'm not sure I'm reading this correctly, but we'll see. Now, I think it's interesting that the way I'm reading it, the 5,000 K does a lot better than 3,500, and it's almost to the 41. Why is it that as I understand it, a hotter light that I would think would be brighter is seen?
Yeah, it's
Lower.
interesting, and I think Tacoma mentioned the same thing to us, and when they talked to Seattle about this, they were somewhat surprised as well, but for whatever reason, 5,000 Kelvin was not as superior in this case as 4,100, so.
That's really strange.
Our city standard light fixture, is there something, an add-on feature, something they can put on those that would keep the light on the roadway and not necessarily reflected into the neighborhoods?
Yes.
So
Can that be
that's-
added?
that's an
Yeah,
option.
we can, and we have. I mean,
So it's more
that's-
directed.
That's kind of designed into our luminaires, as they said.
But they're flat now.
Yeah, they are.
Yes, the lamps are above the dome that sits in, the lamps are recessed into the dome. And
But still, it'll flare out this way. Is there something, a rim that can go on there that keeps it out of the neighborhood necessarily?
On the backside of the
Yeah.
luminaire, I think there's something that, I think we could look into that.
Yeah,
I think that would be really
think
good.
that would-
Guard or something.
In general, light poles do have that add-on feature for a shield.
Yeah,
Does that work directly with the city's standard light pole? I can't answer that right now.
Yeah, you still want it to throw light on the sidewalk, so you want to be careful that you were lighting the sidewalk and the roadway. It's nice to have. pedestrians.
Since you're talking about sidewalk, I have a question then. On the back on the sidewalk side, where the two different views with two different alternatives you had. On the bottom one, the bicycles and pedestrians are right on the same level as the cars. Whereas it seemed to be safer in alternative one, where the sidewalk is on the other side of the parkway. So I think that's, even though I think that's the version that a couple more trees have to come down with, but it is ideally much more safe for pedestrians as far as cars going off the road. So I think that should be a huge consideration.
I concur with you that the further away you can place pedestrians from vehicles, the safer they are.
Is that retaining wall the same height the entire length of the 38?
It varies, yeah.
It varies, I would think.
Yeah. Right.
Councilmember Likens?
Yeah, and just looking at alternative 1 and 2, alternative 1, it seems also has the light lower and further away from the home, correct? Is that a significant difference or is it just a foot or two?
It's only a foot or two, you know, it's gonna go in that 5.5 foot planter for the roadway section. And or at the back of the 6 foot, so you're only talking about a couple feet. So I don't think there's much difference in how much
Okay, it
closer it is.
seems lower down.
Yeah, that's just the graphic, you know, so
Okay.
they will be a standard 20-foot height.
So that retaining wall, is it ever so high? It would require like a nail wall?
No, these would be gravity block.
There's lots of areas where no retaining walls required as well.
Yeah.
If I look at where the lamp is positioned in 1 versus 2, it looks like 2 would allow us to have that, I don't know, cap
Shield, yeah,
shield
you're right.
to the houses.
Yeah.
Whereas we wouldn't have that on 1, because if we had it on 1,
You have to open it up.
it's a lot.
You wouldn't have as much pedestrian lighting on
Yeah,
one
right.
with a shield.
Right. So to me, that's a good thing about 2.
Alternative 1 also requires more maintenance, long-term maintenance from the city, because we're gonna have to water, fertilize, mow that strip. And take care of whatever bushes are put in there. As far as safety goes. One option is to put a small curb between the bike path and the road.
Looks like there
So
is
that
one.
now it's double curb.
No, I don't think so.
There's a curb between the bike and the sidewalk.
Sidewalk.
Yeah, he's talking about.
Typically, you don't want to have, I mean, it depends on the scenario, but in this case, if you were saying a curb between the bike and the road, is that what you're
Yeah.
suggesting?
You know, I mean, optimal, but a lot more money would be
Yeah.
rails along there to really make it
I'll say
a
that
safe area.
most cyclists prefer to have access to the road so that if there's some sort of
Yeah.
object in the bike lane, they can easily, of course, safely go around it. And I think that buffer regarding the pedestrian separation, that bike lane buffer, it should be, considered a separation from the travel lane as part of the discussion here.
Which bike lane buffer we? talking
I'm just
about?
saying that you don't have cars traveling directly next to the curb line. And so that is an element of safety to have pedestrians separated by, the 1.5 foot curb plus the 5 foot bike
Oh,
lane.
it is, yeah.
But it's no
we can
doubt
make
the other
the
one
curb-
is safer.
I agree, yeah. I mean, well, yeah, as further you get away from the road, yeah, it would be safer.
There's clearly things we can do to alternative 2 to make that even safer for pedestrians as well.
At what cost?
Well, everything costs.
And if anybody's worried about reduction in trees, we can plant trees in that planter.
Not enough,
No, room.
not enough room.
We require at least 5 foot wide planter strip to plant street trees. Just for the health of the tree, we just find that street trees and narrow planter strips damage our road and aren't as healthy.
But I think it is important to note too, and then getting back to council, commitment on trees, that regardless of which alternative council chooses, we do have the internal policy, if you will, to replant trees for what is taken down. I'm not suggesting one over the other. I'm just saying that if you do end up going with one, then we have the commitment as shown by Jeff and his team on other projects to replant trees, not necessarily here, but elsewhere within the city.
But these are fully immature trees, and I understand getting extra ones back is nice.
And just a clarification about the streetlight, Stephanie, our associate engineers reminded me that our current standard streetlights are dark sky compliant. And they already come with cutouts or fill-in areas so that you can reduce that cone of light coming out. And just how you design it in the makeup of the lamp itself can have an effect on that will benefit. So we can, as part of the design, just make sure that we have those set up by the contractor and the manufacturer to limit throw outside of the area that we're focusing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, quick time check. We have 11 minutes to try, and I really want them to get through their entire presentation. So let's hold questions to the end. Thank you.
Okay. So getting on to the cost. So we did a preliminary cost estimate for the construction of this project. Alternative 1 came out to 3.6 million, alternative 2, 3.1 million. Alternative 1 also has that right-of-way acquisition that I mentioned. And the main reason for the difference in cost is the excavation, the walls, the tree removal for alternative 1.
Any revenue in the tree?
That wasn't considered.
Higher cost than that.
41 trees.
Yeah.
That's-
So our
I
recommendation.
know I got a big check at the sportsman's club for the trees we took.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of high value trees in this section.
At least timber value.
Timber value.
Yes, we can define value as different things. But
So our recommendation is to essentially do a hybrid of the two. So remove the planter in areas where there's high tree impact. Maximize our use of a planter strip in those areas where we're not impacting trees. And just a preliminary estimate, we're thinking about approximately 700 feet of planter could be added. The blue areas you're seeing are where I think we should have sidewalk adjacent to the curb. The remaining areas would have planter in the standard roadway section. And in this,
So there'd be no sidewalk?
no,
there would be no
Okay,
planter, just no
okay, no
planter.
planter,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
And this alternative would match the alternative 2 tree removal, so we're not increasing trees, that would be the goal.
So do you have a cost for that?
I don't, but that likely would be somewhere in between the two. Because obviously a lot of the wall goes away, a lot of the tree removal go away. It's probably slightly more than alternative 2, but definitely not as close to alternative 1.
So you're recommending a hybrid
Correct,
between 1 and 2?
correct.
What does it look like?
There, if we could please hold questions and comments and let them go through the end of their presentation, it might answer a lot of your questions that are coming.
Yeah, it would essentially be a meandering sidewalk. So you'd have it adjacent to the curb in some areas. We would swoop it out in other areas and have it planted. It would swoop back. So, yeah,
And only 9 tree removal, the same as alternative.
correct.
9 plus the 11,
Yeah, the 11 that we recommend to remove because of poor condition.
which is the same for either.
Okay, so that was one element of our presentation, shifting gears a little bit to talk about 56th Street for your consideration. So this would be new scope to the project. It would be new signals, poles, curb ramps, and sidewalk at all 4 corners. The reason for, basically the reason for this is if we touch the corner at the northeast side there, where our project is getting close to, and we upgrade those ramps, ADA requires us to upgrade all the receiving ramps. It kind of gets into a domino effect and you end up redoing all 4 corners anyway. So the advantages, the city ultimately needs to construct the intersection improvements to continue with their 38th Avenue improvements. Phase 2 is our current project, and then phase 1C in 2027 would be south. Another advantage, you can now have a fully ADA accessible crossing at all legs. Again, on the west side, so the northwest and southwest corners currently don't have any curb ramps or sidewalks, so those are not ADA compliant. You get new signal infrastructure where currently it is getting fairly old, the existing signals.
These signals were installed by Pierce County when the city hadn't yet annexed the west side, so none of the infrastructure in there meets our current standard. And even though we did construction on the corridor in 2012 or 13 or something, this traffic signal was not updated.
So isn't PCC straight down?
No, this is the corner of 56 and 38, so the southeast corner is Arco gas station. And Patterson's is right across on the west side.
Oh, gotcha.
So, so yeah, this would make it forward compatible for the future, projects. Disadvantages, cost 1.2 million, most of that is the signal system. And you know, if you wait till 2027, those costs could go up. Traffic impacts on 56 during construction, of course. Just overall project construction duration is extended, some potential right-of-way impacts in the corners. So those are the considerations there. And then our recommendation, working with city staff, is we go ahead and construct these improvements at this intersection, including it with 38 phase 2 in 2024. So this is the end of our presentation, I believe. So yeah.
Okay, so Councilmember Henderson, and then I believe Councilmember Wood.
Thanks. Can you go back to the one slide back? Can I ask you to look at the radii of the sidewalks there? The problem when you're making okay, let me get a broader thing. We're gonna be trying to encouraging people to walk because we're putting in nice sidewalks, right? They're gonna be crossing the streets. It's good. The problem is when you got those, what I call high-speed radii there, people are gonna rip around those things and that becomes dangerous for pedestrians. So I would request if you could maybe look at sharpening that radii to slow people down when they're making that right turn. That's all. Not that we're not gonna do this.
Yeah.
But if we got more people using this, more people are gonna be crossing the street. Those types of radii invite higher speeds because I don't have to turn as hard.
Yep, no, I agree with you. I will also just state that there are city standard curb return radii, and those are usually based on the truck movements that need to make those
Yeah.
turns. So
Let's look into it.
Yes.
That's all I ask.
agreed.
Because I want to protect pedestrians and we give them a great place to walk. Let's make it safe.
Okay.
Thanks.
Councilmember Wood?
Part of that property, isn't that in Pierce County? Part of that intersection?
Oh, well, the right of way is not, the right of way is completely ours.
Yeah.
The properties to the west are in Pierce County.
Okay, at this
At
intersection,
this
right?
intersection.
So like by Patterson, but that intersection is because it's in the right of way, it's totally ours.
It's totally ours.
We're not gonna get any money from Pierce County, that's what I was trying for.
Yeah, I think we know someone there. Good job.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your comment.
So in the few minutes we have left, what is the specific direction that you need from council today in this meeting?
We need to see if there's a support for the staff's recommendation, first of all, for a hybrid of alternative 1 and 2. And we are looking for what direction on whether or not we should include this signal reconstruction with the 38th Avenue Phase 2 project, which would make the which would not be able to continue the bike lane through to from the 56 bike lane north onto 38th. You have to exit bikes onto the sidewalk and then get them right back onto the bike lane as soon as they get around the corner. Or, and then if we don't do the intersection improvements, we would have to do those intersection improvements with phase 1C in the future.
One important thing, and I apologize if I didn't hear you say this, but the additional cost for doing this full intersection was not budgeted within the budget that was just passed. And I believe it's at $1.2 million additional to do this.
Correct, the budget is 3.5.
Yeah, 3.5 for construction.
And so if we decide to do this full intersection, we're likely have to go back and reevaluate another project and potentially push that off to 25, 26 due to, we know what our ending fund balance was at the end. So just for your consideration.
So the 3.5 was the hybrid, but doesn't include 56.
They didn't have a price.
So it doesn't include the signal, the signal improvements.
Councilmember Likens?
Yeah, thank you. So the 1.2 million, are there, because this is sidewalk related also, is there any chance for grant money with Safe Streets or any of those type of programs to include this?
we would have a stronger case for safe routes to schools if we had sidewalk immediately south of 56 the rest of the way to schools.
Okay.
But because there's a gap, and that's one of the
Okay.
things we've been talking about for years,
Yeah.
how we sequence these.
Yeah.
That would not be, I don't think, a viable project at all. And then we've been talking about whether or not this project would be eligible for TIV grant funds at all. And they have two grant programs that we usually look at. And the only part of this, if we were to do the full road section, we're doing half width improvements, we're doing full improvements, it would be a great candidate for their arterial program, or arterial program. But we're only doing one side and it just wouldn't rate well. So we look at their sidewalk program, but those don't fund at very high dollar amounts. Those are intended for constructing a sidewalk only, which the city used to do, but we don't do anymore. We only do half width and full width.
So we may have up to 500,000 available through TIV if we go for it and win something through their sidewalk program.
Okay, great.
Well, I guess these are could be two distinctly different projects. And the timing would be everything, but aren't we going to relook at our budget again in a year? And keep in mind what revenues may be. There may be a revenue increase more than Dave thinks. So is this something that we can move forward on a 38th Street improvements? Thinking that we could possibly do this, then after we see the forecast for 2023 revenues, we pull the trigger on this.
Following up on that is an option. We could design it even with the intersection improvements or have the intersection improvements be an alternative bid schedule.
That's what I was.
That would cause us, either way, we'd have to, because we're designing a new part of the new scope, we'd have to pay more for design. But we could then have an additive bid schedule so that when we receive bids, we could say bid schedule A, for example, sidewalk only, bid schedule B, intersection improvements to remove these items and stuff.
And to no fault of our own, whenever we put something like this off, that 1.2 escalates so quickly.
Yes.
We found that on every project we've done, to no fault of our own, just.
I'd recommend.
Hold on, Councilmember Wilkins had a hand.
Thank you. I'm in favor of the hybrid, though I wish that there had been a diagram of it. So I'm in favor of the hybrid, and I'm in favor of maybe designing the intersection, but not allocating the funds until we see if we have funds. So I'm not in favor of increasing our budget and until Dave gets back to us, like Lee said, I'm in favor of that.
I agree.
Me too. I agree.
Design it as a bid option.
So we'll work with our consultants to come back with a cost estimate to having a contract amendment to add this as an additive bid item. To the intersection.
Yeah, and I like the hybrid as well.
Yeah.
Did we all kind of agree on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Mutual agreement for the hybrid.
Yeah, that was
Should-
a great option.
Yeah, no, I don't know why we spent so
Would've
much
saved
time
time.
on the other two.
Process.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great option. That's not.
Okay, so I think there's general consensus for the hybrid and then designing the intersection, but waiting to put that in the budget until we revisit the budget
And the two-phase bid.
and the two-phase bid. Okay,
And kudos to Public Works and the consultant.
Yes,
for
Thank
the
you.
work. And, especially, we aren't always going to be able to bring forward options in this regard for all projects and all things, but I appreciate Public Works bringing forward options for council consideration in projects like this.
Yeah, and please look for something on hiding to reduce the impact through the off-street area and still be safe.
Sounds like we can do that with the lighting, with the manufacturer when we order them.
Yes, I
Okay.
mean, that would be the intent, is to make sure, I mean, that seems like our street lights. When you drive down the road at night, look at our street lights versus
yeah.
what we call Cobra heads, which are the ones just come on the telephone poles. And ours are more focused and don't spread out as much. But yeah, we have ways to really reduce the flow of those lights.
great. Thank you all very much. Thank you. If there is nothing else from council, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, I think all of you said it, so